Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. Today's Tuesday, April the 8th, and we get to play in this arena once again of first century Aramaic forgiveness and all of the corollary tools and the decoding of the Aramaic concepts according to the first century meanings of the words of this man named Yeshua. You go back and you listen to him, and the Greeks translate this idea correctly, although not many people have the eyes to see or the ears to hear what it means. But he says, in order to understand my work, in order to utilize my work, you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. What's he saying? He's saying that you've got to have the same brain cells firing in you as are firing in him, actually be able to comprehend the words that he's speaking. If we're not listening from the same brain cells, then we're not hearing or we're not garnering the same meanings. And the objective is, the words are relatively meaningless. You've perhaps heard me use the example before, just briefly. Imagine I'm doing a workshop and we've got somebody from Russia that wants to come, and I know you personally, and you're the best translator of Russian into English and English into Russian in the world. And I ask you if you would, pick this fellow up at the airport, house him. He speaks no English. Would you translate for him? And of course, you're just overjoyed to do that. And after a whole 9-day, why is this happening to me again, intensive, we've had a great time with this person. We've really connected with him. I still don't speak any Russian. So I ask you, as you're taking him back to the airport, to explain to him that I think he's just really cool. I want him to know, how I feel about him. And you turn to him in your best Russian and you tell him that Michael thinks he's got a low body temperature. You translated my words perfectly, but you didn't say a word about what I meant. My offering is what I've been working for over the last half century is to bring the original Aramaic words forward. And there were 25 of the world's top Aramaists, the original translation work that was done from the Kabbalah manuscript. The main focal point of these translators was to establish the first century meanings of the words. And my partner, Dan McDougall, you probably heard me speak of him. Man was a genius, and he directed the translation work. And basically, as an attorney, he used the rules of evidence to determine what got into the translation and what did not. So the idea of establishing the first century meaning of those words was key to creating the translation work that was done. And then, because there are so many words that there's just not a concept for, there's not even the idea of certain key precepts out of the Aramaic. There's not such a thing in the English language or the Greek or the Latin. So pretty hard to get to. And so what the work has been over the last half century is to ferret out the meanings of those words, the brain cells that those words were spoken from, so we could accurately listen to his voice, listen to the tools that were being proposed. So that's been a focal point in developing this work over the last 50 years or so. And so we're delighted and honored that you're here to be part of the conversation. And it takes time because there's a transition that needs to be made from the old way of perceiving. It's interesting, Vladimir Lenin, the man who's probably responsible for more deaths on planet Earth than anybody in history, said in order to destroy a culture, you change the meaning of its words. And so many words have been shifted and turned backward. Let's just take our key concept of forgiveness. Our culture has been taught, or we've been taught in this culture, that forgiveness is about how, of course, if I'm in pain, you're the problem in my life, and what I should do is just let you off the hook for what's going on inside of me. I should forgive you. the most asinine thing that has ever been suggested in history. And I say asinine because the simple changing of the meaning of that word, I offer, is the reason why there is conflict in our world, why there is divorce, why there is murder, why there is crime, why there is starvation, why there are wars. One reason: forgiveness. The lack of an understanding of what that word means. It has nothing to do with me letting you off the hook for the pain that's happening inside of me, but it describes, if you have the brain cells for it, the first century tool with which you go inside of yourself and remove the brain cell, remove the meanings, remove the trauma, the drama that never belonged within a human system. So just that simple word. And we could spend hours talking about, in fact, we do a 4-hour workshop called Aramaicisms. And that word is a term that I coined to represent our effort to do the best we could to return to the first century meanings of Yeshua's Aramaic words. And of course, in particular, to recognize that forgiveness is key. And so the objective of this work is to return to, well, let's look at another word that's been turned backward: love. It's been made into what? Sexual athletics, putting your head on the chopping block to prove that you're willing to suffer for someone else. That shows you love them. And that's just another fraud. As big a fraud as the idea of forgiveness is about me letting you off the hook. Love is the truth of who you are. It is your created essence. And no one lacks that essence. No one. However, it's been covered up by the generationally reinforced hostilities, fears, poverty thoughts, grief, loss, dishonesty, deception, weakness of generation upon generation that had no access to forgiveness. You'll remember the quote that said, perfect love drives out fear. What is perfect love? There are two ideas from the Aramaic language that remove the fear-based patterns within a mind, and it is the fear-based patterns that are at the root of all conflict in the world. And those two ideas are ideas that have no equivalent in English, Greek, or Latin. Rachma, number one. When they said to Yeshua, what's most important in the law? Well, let's take a look at that word law before we go into what's most important. Notice that we live in a culture where law means the rule of a superior. There's a big daddy up there in the sky, or there's a big daddy in Washington. It's going to get you if you don't obey. It's one of the biggest frauds ever perpetrated upon man. That's got nothing to do with law. That's men's rules and regulations, ordinances. Law in Aramaic means not the rule of a superior, but simply the way things work. When they said to Yeshua, what's most important in the law? He didn't say love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Another word that's been destroyed: love. It is your eternal essence. So he said, in order to maintain your eternal essence, what's most important in being a human being? He didn't say love your neighbor. He said have Brahma for your neighbor, have Brahma for the Creator. And by so doing, you maintain your human life. The objective of this work is for you to contact and live from your human life, which is a place of generosity, of honesty, of truth, and of living the life based in active present love, where none of the insanity of the culture is even possible. But because these words have been lost, because these energetic patterns have been lost, people get lost in the fear and hostility that blocks the awareness of themselves as the presence of love. So you listen to John 1:4-18. There is no fear in love. And yet, what do we have? We have a term in our culture: tough love. Like if you beat somebody up, then you can show them that you love them. Or somehow you put them into some sort of fear mode so they change their behaviors. Fear is not a part of love. Isn't it interesting that so much of Christianity today is out there talking about how fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Excuse me. Listen to that statement in John. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. If fear is the governing filter within your mind, Rahma is shut down. Perfect love cannot enter, cannot be active within that mind, and that's where the healing takes place. And so we're looking to reestablish the first century meanings of these key Aramaic concepts, and in so doing, bring forward the possibility that we could each be living truly as human beings. And we've been talking now for several days, and before I get into, I'll just ask folks to hold off any questions or comments. I've been working for about a week now to get through the pseudo solutions of the non-being mind, and what I'd like to do is just finish that list so we can get them complete. We've actually done it now. It's several days we've kind of danced around that. And so I'm just going to jump into pseudo solution, repeat number 6, and that is that as opposed to Rahma being the solution to everything in life, Rahma in Aramaic, here are the brain cells that need to fire in you when you think of what's first, what's most important for being a human being. You have this gateway, this filter in the frontal lobes of your mind active. It is a gateway that brings active present love into your human physiology. And if that gateway is open, then love is present in your mind. When love is not present, when conscious awareness is not present in the mind, then a false self arises from the energetic patterns stored in carbon-based memory, stored in what was called the mind of man, or stored in the body. And those patterns literally create a world of perception within the mind that blocks everything true about who we are as human beings. And so that non-being mind, that hostility and fear-based mind, offers what I call pseudo solutions. Oh, if you only do this, then everything will be okay. We ran through quickly what we'd started a week before, the first 5 or 6 of them. So I'm going to repeat number 6 and then just jump in on the rest of the pseudo solutions. So if I could just control everything and everyone. So the person who has shut down this gateway and this filter called Rahma now is generally controlled by fear. And in that fear-based mind, what the perceptual construct of that mind will do is offer that the solution to all of your problems is if you could just control everyone and everything. And you give up your human life love in order to become a non-human controlling, if that becomes the dominant pseudo solution that you use. And the idea here is to rid oneself of these pseudo solutions. And that means that you have to take up the energetic patterns of whatever is within you that inhibit you from functioning fully as a human being. Here's where Yeshua spoke about, whoever does not take up his cross and follow me. You notice he didn't say take up my cross. He said, you have to take up your cross. What is it in your mind that when hostility or fear become active, tears you out of the connected space of active love where the only intelligence of the universe resides, and puts you into carbon-based memory that tells you here's how to win? So pseudo solution number 7 in our list, from the codependence to interdependence communication practicum, is to strain and struggle. When hostility or fear take over, being, the truth of who we are, is blocked. When one has blocked the truth of their original essence as active love, then the non-being mind, the false self, the self that Yeshua said, in order for you being to live, you non-being mind have to die. That has to be removed. So if one does not have a direct contact with the truth of who they are, if they're functioning off of this false self, then there's this another of the pseudo solutions is to strain and struggle to make up for a non-being life. And when you do that, the person who lives in this pseudo solution is basically looking for validation. And you look at how common this one is and how many people are struggling and straining to get stuff. And the stuff is about validation. And they've given up their human lives, love, to become a non-human having and a non-human getting. So if you find that your mind's counseling you, well, just get more stuff, then you'll be happy. Then recognize that that's never going to get you what you want. But in that moment, you can apply forgiveness and begin to dissolve the false pseudo solutions of the non-being mind. And each of them, once dissolved, removes the block to the awareness of the truth of who we are as love. When the non-being mind, with all of its pain and drama and trauma and fear and strain and struggle, and it's trying to figure it out, is active, all of that noise covers over the simple natural truth that your human beingness is enough. The number 8 pseudo solution is that of vengeance. If I could just get even with them, if I could just inflict enough pain on them, if I could just do enough damage to them. You look at the political scene today, and you look at how much those who live in this solution are inflicting pain regardless of the quote unquote law, and using it as an excuse to just, well, we're going to fix things. This is our solution. All we need to do is inflict enough damage on them, and then everything's going to be okay. And that means in that pseudo solution, one becomes a non-human raging, a non-human manipulator, a non-human theft. And in that pseudo solution, there's a loss in the belief that that person is totally imbued. Their mind is just overwhelmed with the belief that strength is power, and so they'll do anything to beat down or to win, or what appears to be win. And it's really totally weakness masquerading as strength. So if vengeance is the solution to the pseudo solution that carbon-based memory comes up with, then again, one becomes a non-human raging, a non-human manipulating, a non-human stealing, a non-human abusing. And when one has even the slightest inkling of being, these states of mind become abhorrent. Even though those states of mind may exist in one who has contact with being, they are simply a state those situations where that comes up are simply the opportunities to learn forgiveness, are the opportunities to remove those pseudo solutions from the mind and return to the state of being, return to their human lives. Weakness is not strength. The gentleness of active, present love, conscious in every moment, extended to everyone without regard for who they are, is where true strength exists. And all of that vengeance stuff is nothing more. That desire to inflict pain or damage to get even is nothing more than weakness. The next pseudo solution is to live in denial. And remember our definition of denial, and this is one that just it's one that the mind has to hear over. When I'm talking about the mind, I'm talking about carbon-based memory, has to hear over and over and over again until they can hear their own language. So this pseudo solution is founded in denial. What is denial? When I think or speak, and it's really time for us all to pay attention to our words. And every time you notice yourself thinking or speaking as though something outside of you is the cause of what's moving inside of you, that's the time to stop and recognize I'm in denial. And by doing so, I put my pain into my brain's image of someone else, the one that I'm blaming. And so the person in this situation that lives in denial, it's like, if I could just convince them that they're the problem in my life, then everything would be okay. If I could just convince them, if they change, then my life would be fine. But you'll notice that you've probably been through that situation 87 different times with 42 different people, trying to convince somebody else they need to change in order for what's going on inside of you to shift. Excuse me. The only way things are going to shift inside of you is when you get out of denial, you take responsibility, and you start to change what's going on inside of you. This whole use of the language, they made me. They made me sad. They made me afraid. They hurt me. That really upset me. That disturbed me. If one lives in this pseudo solution, they've given up their human lives' love to become a non-human blaming. And just, turn on the television set and listen to the conversations at news time. And everybody being interviewed, doesn't matter what station you're on, everybody being interviewed has got a blame story about how it's somebody else's fault. That's all living in those pseudo solutions of the non-being mind. One has to reclaim their own lives. And this particular pseudo solution, that means that I give up all conversations about how somebody else is the problem. Does that mean that there are not people who are a problem in the world? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is nobody else needs to change in order for you to go inside yourself, take responsibility, and change what's happening in you. When you bring a changed self to the world changes. Einstein brilliantly said, the theory you have about a thing determines what you observe. If the theory you have about a thing, really, tap into and hear that word out of Einstein's mouth. The theory you have about a thing, whatever your thoughts are, the theory you have about a thing determines what you can observe. Period. If you think somebody else, if your belief system holds every time you're in pain it's somebody else's fault, then your mind has to hallucinate a world where somebody else is the problem. And so that person lives to convince somebody else. And they've given up their human lives' love to become a non-human blaming. Now, do people do crazy things? Do people do off-the-wall things? Do people do illegal, immoral, criminal things? Absolutely. But are people doing those things the cause of what's happening inside of you? Never in a million years. But because the human mind is an evidential device, and this is such an important point. Remember the Harvard research we talked about? They put somebody in the lab, and in a time frame where 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity are happening, 10,000 brain cells are firing, the max amount of data that you can see on a conscious level out of that 10,000 brain cells is 9 bits. That means you're looking at evidence. The reason why the theory you have about a thing determines what you observe, because the evidential mind obeys the theories that you have about a thing. And you will never see the part of you that you need to change as long as your language is the language of blame, because you're telling your mind to show you evidence. Words instruct the mind how to construct, literally, its reality structures. So if your theory, i.e., reflected in words, is, yes, they made me mad, then what you in fact said to your mind, and let's do the long form of this. Let's include the whole truth in this one. If I'm mad, there's an energy in me that is painful to me that is tied to fear. When I say you made me mad, the theory I have about this thing is it's all your fault. What I am in essence saying to my evidential mind is, mind, you are not allowed to show me that I have anything to do with my anger. Just build me a picture, build me a world where I can clearly see, and I have all the evidence I need to prove that they're the problem in my life. And that person becomes a non-human blaming, because through denial, they've dissociated from the content of their own minds. Through this putting of pain, and when you look at this 9-bit world that we live in, this construct called perception, if I have pain in me and tell my mind to show me my pains caused by someone else, literally, I will take that energy, I'll take that information myself, and I'll build a picture. Remember, the human mind has the capacity to convert thoughts into pictures. So if my thought is, yes, I've been through this pain 87 different times with 42 different people, but this time it truly is them, then I'll literally take that information in me, that energy that's causing pain, and I'll use it to build my brain's image of whoever the them is at this moment. And notice that last month it was some other them, and the year before that it was some other them, and 10 years ago it was a different them, and 20 years ago it was a different them, and 30 and 50 years ago it was a different them. And guess what? If you never come out of denial, then 2 months from now, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, there'll be somebody else that your mind will show you. They're the reason that there's pain, because you built through denial, you built your brain's image of them, your perceptual construct, out of your own denied and dissociated pain, because what you deny and dissociate is projected on the object of your current goals, whoever it happens to be. So if you've been through this thing 87 different times with 42 different people, and you start to notice that you're the only one that was there every time, then maybe you stop functioning as a non-human blaming. You start to apply forgiveness and collapse your mind's capacity to produce pain, and you step back into functioning as the active presence of love. But you can't listen to these pseudo solutions and follow them if you're ever going to do that. It's just not possible. And just, watch most of the world. This is like one of the number one, next to, if I could just figure this out, this is the next pseudo solution, is it's all somebody else's fault. And I'm just making a note here to reorder my solutions and put this one in as number 2. Next to, and of course you've heard me say this one a million times, the number one pseudo solution of the non-being mind is, if I could just figure this out. I'm realizing as we speak right now, the number 2 is, and that is denial. Thinking or speaking as though someone outside of me. Oh, that made me mad, that made me sad, that upset me, that disturbed me. And I'm with you, Brett. I hear you. It's so easy to just push it away, holding the thought that I made all my choices to land in this pain this time, in and out. But I believe you truly, but I don't feel I'm allowed to step into that yet. Brett, it's a major choice to step into shifting the language. I mean, it's mega. In fact, it's so deep. If you go back into the ancient scriptures, they said the power of life and death is in our words. That's how much of a challenge it is. And so to let go of this thing of speaking and thinking as though someone else is the cause of what's happening inside of me becomes key in the true forgiveness process. And remember that forgiveness is the removal of the energetic patterns that never belonged within a human mind in the first place. The day that humanity took on the language of blame was the day of the fall. In fact, go back and take a look. You remember the story in the Garden of Eden, the metaphor of the rise of humanity? And there was a mistake made. An energy that was off the mark was engaged in. And what was the story? Well, you'll notice that Eve, in that metaphorical story, had someone to blame. It was the snake. And you'll notice that Adam, he had two to blame. Remember who he blamed? He said, God, that woman you gave me. He had both the woman and God to blame. And once we start the language of blame, once we step outside of responsibility, we literally give up our capacity as creators. We literally step into a false, fake world of perception. You got to give it up. And then the next pseudo solution of the non being mind, number 10 in my list, is take the easy way. Just stay in autopilot and do the behaviors of the past. Never put in the effort to do an original thought. Just sit around and whine and complain about the past. And again, play the blame game. And the person who, takes the easy way, basically the whole culture's again in this blame game. And so it's everybody else's fault. So now one becomes gives up the human life they have, the presence of love, to become a non-human suffering and a non-human victim. It's all everybody else's fault. And it's not an easy path to step up to the plate and say, and now I'm going to take responsibility for all the beliefs based in blame that I have, that my generations have sourced, that have been going on in my bloodline forever. I'm actually going to step out of that. I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to change the functioning of my own mind. That's like a mega major piece of work that each of us ultimately has to do in order to change this game, in order to shift out of functioning as non-humans and into truly functioning as the active presence of love, as the created essence that we are. It's a mega major piece of work and not an easy piece of work to do. And people say, well, Michael, how do you do that? So here's where if we're in an intensive, I would be turning to the board and saying, or writing on the board in the largest letters I could, all of the above, every tool we've got. If you went back to the first archive of the first radio show from 2011, and listened to the daily radio show, an hour a day, 5 days a week for the last 15 years, I would speak nothing about recovery from the insanity of the blame game, of the suffering, of the victimhood, of the belief that everybody else is at fault, and the belief that my mind feeds me that if I could just figure this out, if I could just come up with enough a deep enough explanation to explain to them what's wrong with them and how they need to change. And guess what? If I could come up with a deep enough explanation to convince them, it would do nothing to change the content of my mind, which is the source of my pain. The next pseudo solution is that of being right. The person who lives in denial never has any suspicion of self. The person who lives in denial has literally a whole cadre of words, a whole language based in proving that somebody else is the problem. So the addiction to being right becomes the next challenge. Trying to prove I'm not responsible for what's happening in my life, somebody else is. And it's interesting to watch how some of the people in the culture who proclaim themselves the biggest, the wealthiest, the smartest people with the best brains and the best words and the best intelligence and the best education are all about being victims and proving that somebody else is responsible for what's going on in their lives. So the person who lives in this pseudo solution becomes a non-human convincing. Trying to convince, so when the mind comes up and I'm going to convince myself, I'm going to convince somebody else that they're the problem, your mind's giving you another lie. Each of these pseudo solutions is a lie. Each of these pseudo solutions is the mind's twisted way of trying to avoid the fact that they are creators. Oh, everybody wants to be a creator. Oh, yes, look how powerful I am. Look how great I am. But when things aren't going right, notice the whole conversation about how it's everybody else's fault. I'm a victim of, and they've got a list 1,000 miles long, and it's everybody and everything else. So that person becomes a non-human convincing. Remember, the culture has this saying, methinkest thou protesteth too much? Well, that's what it's talking about, is this pseudo solution, the non-human convincing. And if convincing doesn't work, then the number 12 pseudo solution is to obfuscate. And when we obfuscate, there's distraction, there's confusion, there's switching issues. Oftentimes the language of the person who's obfuscating is, well, look, you did it too. If you're in a conversation with someone and they try to obfuscate with that, you did it too, that's a good time to stop and say, you know something, you're right, I did do that. But tell you what, our conversation right now is what you did. So how about we finish that conversation and then let's go and look at what I did. And if I did something out of line, then I'll take responsibility for it and I'll heal. And I'm going to invite you to do the same. So this distraction, confusion, switching issues, you did it. And that pseudo solution, that lie of the mind, leads one to stepping into becoming, giving up the truth of who they are as love, giving up their human lives to become a non-human confusing. All they want to do is confuse the issues, just all kinds of crazy excuses to keep things confused rather than allowing or moving toward clarity. So that's just one more pseudo solution to give up. The number 13 and final pseudo solution we're going to cover today is that of leaving. Escape. That can show up as literally physically leaving or emotionally leaving. And emotionally leaving looks like pretending, oh, I'm not angry. How often have you heard someone, you say, Jesus, you look angry about that. Oh, I'm not angry. Well, if you're not angry, why are you even talking about anger? If you're happy about the situation, why aren't you talking about happiness? So this pseudo solution of escaping, of literally vacating one's own life, the pretense that, oh no, I'm not involved in this at all, or the desire, another way of leaving or escaping is to get rid of them. And in order to do that, one has to become a non-human leaving, a non-human escaping. And so if this list of pseudo solutions makes sense to you and you recognize that they are nothing but mental constructs, they've been going on for generations and generations and generations, unwinding them is a major challenge. But if you begin in each situation to detail the pseudo solution that your mind has perhaps always presented to you, the whole idea of blaming someone else can also be turned on blaming self. It becomes the same thing, the blame game. You'll notice that our worksheet is the whole foundation of it is the proclamation of innocence. It's a no, you notice at the top, no fault forgiveness. There's no idea here of who we're going to blame for this, who we're going to find the guilty party. The objective is simply to become conscious creators, own our creatorship, and change the parts of our minds that have bought into any form of hostility or fear, and to bring healing to the mind rather than simply playing out the dynamics of the past. So they are the 13 pseudo solutions of the non-being mind. And so what I'd like to do is simply open the floor to conversation. How are these pseudo solutions fitting for you? Does it make sense? Questions about any one of them or what to do with them. And of course, ultimately, the objective would be to apply forgiveness wherever one of these pseudo solutions comes up. You know, if I'm in blame mode and I want to talk about what you did, I'm in pain, but I want to talk about what you did, that's where I'd stop and I'd do a worksheet on myself. I'd take out the forgiveness process and I'd name myself in number 1A, and then I'd use my name again in number 1C. And I want to just blame you. What's the goal that I hold? I want somebody else to be responsible for my life. So following through and engaging in the forgiveness process is what opens a space to collapse that pseudo solution in the non-me mind and return us to the literal capacity to function in the moment of stress and pain, to function as active present love. That's ultimately the objective of this work. One of the other games that I've seen people play is to just, you know, really expand this whole idea of self-blame and proclaim oneself as guilty. And in proclaiming oneself as guilty, to just hang out in that self-blame game, as opposed to taking responsibility for and moving through the energetic patterns that are creating the pain. Remember that pain is caused by engaging in an energy that doesn't belong in the system. That's all it is. Pain is a result of sin. And let's go to the Aramaic meaning of the word sin, lest you get caught in the Greek and that whole machination that the Greeks played around this idea of sin being this big evil, you know, something's out to get you. The word sin in Aramaic is simply an archery term. If you're on the archery range and you fired at the target with your bow and arrow and you miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin. All it means is you're off the mark. Rather than building a big defense or a big attack strategy around being in pain and off the mark, the objective here is to do the reverse, is to dissolve that energy that's being held in tissue that maybe was established generations and generations ago, and to begin the dissolution of those energies. And remember that the word forgive, we could easily substitute dissolve, remove. That's what the word means. So in Yeshua's terms, if he said forgive, and it's interesting because we live in a culture that has totally and completely bastardized the Aramaic language. We're told that Yeshua actually said to forgive your brother or forgive yourself. But in Aramaic, those words are never spoken. That does not appear within those texts. Anytime that the Greeks translate forgive your brother, there are always two words that are left out of the translation. So as opposed to Yeshua saying, forgive your brother, Yeshua would say to you, if you were in pain or turmoil and you were in the pseudo solution of blaming your brother, Yeshua would say, forgive not your brother, but forgive as to your brother. Those two words are always missed in the translation. So what does it mean if I forgive as to my brother? Well, let's imagine you're my brother or my sister, and you do a behavior that brings up some sort of pain or upset in me. Do I need to forgive you for that? No. If there's pain, the only way I can feel pain or upset is if there's pain or upset in me. Now, I can project that. I can pretend that my pain and upset is about you, but I can only feel an energy that's inside of me. So when Yeshua would say, forgive as to your brother, he's saying, if you've interacted with your brother and your brother has done something that brings up pain in you, then you step into ownership of your pain. You thank your brother for showing it to you, and you forgive as to what that brother or sister brought up in you. And so the result of actually engaging in first century Aramaic forgiveness is the people that show you your pain, you actually end up thanking and appreciating them for it. And I see we've got a hand. So let's say hello to Miss Susan. Susan, how are you, young lady?
Hi. Hi, Michael. Hi, Jeannie.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome. What's on your mind for today?
Well, I've been thinking about, is there ever a time when anger is appropriate? And I have an example. The other day, I thought I looked left at an intersection, but I obviously didn't because I cut off a young woman and she managed to hit the brake before she hit me. But she pulled in front of my car at the edge of the road, got out of the car, and stormed her way toward me. I rolled down my window and I said, before she could say anything, I said, I am so sorry I cut you off. And she said, that's not good enough. She was very upset. And she said, I have a kid in the car. And I said, that's even worse. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. That's not good enough. And I said, what would be good enough? And she said, I don't know, but you just did a terrible thing. And I said, I agree. It was a clean transaction. And she was right. I didn't feel like punching her out or anything. I know I've used language like I'd like to punch her out. Truly, Michael, I didn't. I felt for her.
Right.
I was like that mother myself. And I just said, I'm so glad you're okay and you've got good responses. You got good reactions, very good. And she got in her car and she slammed the door and she went off. And I thought, okay, I better wake up and pay attention. And I'm driving very carefully from there on. And it was a blessing for me because it's probably a wake up call. I'm probably was distracted or something. But
right.
There's a case, I think, of appropriate rage on her part. And I felt I loved her. I was sorry and I loved her. So how does that fit in? I don't think there was any denial in there. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Well, here would be my offering.
Yeah.
You know, Albert Einstein had, I think, one of the most brilliant statements that could be made about anger that any human being could make. And he said, anger only appears in the bosom of fools.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form she should have come up and said, well, thank you for, almost running me off the road or whatever, whatever the result was. I'm not saying that she should be in gratitude for it. But my offering is that she went away from that interaction with you in a dis-ease condition.
Mm,
Literally, physiologically, the chemistry of anger acts as an anesthetic.
mm-hmm,
And, if she was in that much rage,
mm,
my take is probably if you'd have been able to sit down with her and have a conversation, it was like her to- uh, tolerability meter for stress was probably at its max.
yeah.
And so my offering is she could have come up just as easily if she'd have been in the connected, you've done your work. And, could you imagine a time where if that has happened, you might have been in as much anger as she was and been in a conflict over it?
Maybe, I'm not sure. That's a good question because I certainly had a temper for things, but I was so clearly in the wrong and I wasn't
And
being
you've so clearly done your work, so you didn't have to be in denial and you could accept ownership, responsibility. You didn't have to do the blame game, and you could be in compassion and apology, which is awesome. And my offering is if she had been able to do the same thing, she wouldn't have walked away from that situation or driven away from that situation in a dis-ease condition.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well,
If
anyway.
she'd stopped and taken a breath and said, maybe turn to you, hearing and feeling your compassion. My offering is she couldn't feel your compassion and your remorse for what you'd done because she was in such an internally disturbed state. But, if she'd have been able to take a breath and tap into what was going on for her, my offering, there could have been an alternative outcome. And the
Mm,
alternative outcome could have been recognizing someone with compassion. She might have been able to say, "Yeah, this morning my husband and I had this big fight, and my tolerance for stress is through the roof, and my
mm.
child was screaming, and I don't know what to do." And she might have ended up with a friend who
Yeah.
introduced her to a worksheet and allowed her
Yeah.
to literally move through what she and her husband were raging at each other for this morning. I don't know.
Yeah. I suppose
But my
that's true.
guarantee, if she'd have come with the same ownership for her state of mind and compassion that you did, that it would have been a still higher outcome than the one that you had. My offering is there's never a place where anger is useful. Never.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it's like there's never a place where alcohol is useful. All it is an anesthetic. It's a drug against
Yeah.
pain. And so if I can breathe and open the space to embrace my pain rather than move into rage, rather than move into hostility, then I'm freed. And that's in essence what Yeshua was saying when he said first law, first order of business if you're going to be a human being is maintain Rahma. And you know, basically the three filters in the frontal lobes of the brain, there's Rahma, there's fear, and there's hostility.
Yeah.
Only one of them can be active at a time. And in that situation, it sounds like she was in pretty deep blame. So that would be the pseudo solution. Number two, pseudo solution, pretty deep blame. And she had to give up her human life to do that.
Mm,
And that's when what creates crazy time in the world. Whereas, as you've done your work, could come to it and say, "Phew, I screwed up. I'm going to own this. And I'm here as a state of love for you."
mm.
That's a powerful thing to do. Certainly far more powerful than raging. That'd be my offering. And the beauty, when we're in the non-being state, thinking about taking responsibility for a painful internal experience can be very traumatic.
Mm.
But once I start moving to Rahma, taking responsibility for, and I'm thinking my own process personally, I think back to times where I did really key important worksheets in my life.
Mm.
And in those key important worksheets, I can see how insane my mind was And to me, it was exciting. And I could see the projection of my mind. It was exciting to be able to embrace that and go, wow, look at that. And look at that mental illness I had. And I just got to resolve a piece of my mental illness. What if she'd walked away from that interaction with you because there was a space of compassion, love there with healing a piece of her mental illness? Her whole life could have changed around that if hostility hadn't taken over, but she rather knew how to maintain Rahma. That'd be my offering.
Well, yeah, she would have had to have done a lot of good work because she was she was truly the innocent party here
Yep,
when
I hear
she
you.
and she was frightened. She was also her English wasn't great, and she was Hispanic. And I thought, I wonder if she's one of our refugees. I wonder if the stress on them is so bad.
Oh, through the roof. I just can't imagine right now what's going on
Yeah.
for the refugee community. It's just.
Well, it's amazing. I was there today, and we had another of our volunteers come in and say, all right, there's a new situation where you're going to be in danger of deportation. Here's how you get help. We're having a workshop on Thursday at 9 o'clock. We're not going to do English as a second language. We're going to actually help you fill out the forms and get you the materials you'll need so that you can protect yourself. It's
Awesome.
every day it's a new thing, and we have information coming in on how to stay safe. But Marwa, the young woman who lives with us, came home and said, one of our teachers was just taken by the scruff, just taken out of the school. One of the teachers working, and I don't know what her status was.
Right.
Anyway, it is like that.
I was reading an article this morning and I thought someone had a really brilliant insight in this whole DEI thing.
Yeah.
And that DEI is a code word for white, male, straight.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with merit. I mean, if you look at some of the people who are running departments today, they're about as far from merit as anybody could imagine. Some of them even being DUI hires. I mean, you can't get farther from merit than that one. And so it's got nothing to do with merit. It's got to do with white, male, straight.
Yeah.
And that's what's, it's a whole racist agenda that's taking over our culture. And we need to wake up and clean it up. We need to recognize who each of us is as human beings. And when we reclaim the truth of our own human life, then we get to see that human life in others. And it's all coming, the whole thing's coming from pain and trauma. And it's just time for the tools to clean up the pain and trauma to become globally available. To me, it's just more urgent than it's ever been to get these tools out and make them available to people.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking my call. It's 2:00.
It is 2:00. Well, I appreciate you, and we extend the presence of love to you. By the way, watch in your delivery box tomorrow. There's an Amazon package coming for you.
Really?
Yes.
I'm boycotting Amazon.
Well, I did too. I did too. I've been doing that, and there is a product that is not available anywhere else that I think you're going to find useful that I sent. It's supposed to deliver tomorrow. All right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a blessed day. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.